There are dreams that millions of people around the world share. A dream of changing your life. One night you wake up holding a ticket, and suddenly the whole world is in your hands. But that's only half the story. The shocking truth is that for many people, that dream turns into a nightmare. Did you know? About 1/3 of major lottery winners end up declaring bankruptcy within 3 to 5 years. We'll dive deep into real stories. The story of Jack Whitaker, who lost everything and witnessed family tragedy after winning $315 million. The story of Abraham Shakespeare, who was scammed and murdered just 3 years after winning $30 million. And the story of Billy Bob Harrell Jr., who took his own life 20 months later with the note, "Winning the lottery is the worst thing that ever happened." Why does a life-changing dream turn into a curse? Does money truly make you happy? Or does it only expose the deep emptiness within your soul? Let's explore the whole truth. From the illusion of a massive jackpot, to the deadly financial traps, from the social curse to the lessons about greed and loss. The shocking truth about lottery winners isn't about them, it's about us. The end of a tragic story is often the beginning of a valuable lesson. We will seek the light together after that dark night. If you're ready, subscribe to the Sleepless Mind channel now. Let me tell you the next part of this story. The jackpot illusion. The empty promise of a lottery ticket after the tragic and heartbreaking stories in the introduction, where we witnessed lives shattered by a single moment of luck. Let's pause for a moment. Take a deep breath to let the fresh air clear those grim images, and take a few steps back to look at the bigger picture. We need to better understand the nature of what draws millions of people into this whirlwind. The dream of a new life, a beautiful yet fragile illusion, woven from the thinnest threads of hope. Why do we, ordinary people with lives full of worry, fall into this trap so easily? It's not just a personal issue. It's a profound social phenomenon, fueled by human psychology and the power of the media. In America, where the American dream culture is celebrated as an eternal ideal, a lottery ticket isn't just a game. It becomes a symbol of rising from the bottom of society, a promise that anyone, from a factory worker in Detroit to a server in Los Angeles, can touch wealth through one small decision. Try to remember the last time you held a lottery ticket. Be it was a late afternoon at a convenience store off Interstate 95 where you stopped to buy a Powerball ticket for just $2. Or perhaps it was during your lunch break at your office in Manhattan where you quickly bought a ticket on your phone app, amid the hurried crowds of the city that never sleeps. That feeling is hard to put into words. Your heart beats a little faster, your breathing quickens, and your mind starts to paint a series of brilliant scenarios. What if I win? That question doesn't just echo in your head. It awakens the deepest desires of a typical American. A dream house in the suburbs with a white picket fence and a spacious backyard for the family. A shiny Ford F-150 pickup truck to replace the old, constantly breaking car. A trip to Hawaii or Europe to escape the frantic 9-to-5 grind. Or more simply, just to pay off that massive student loan and not have to worry about medical bills or rent anymore. For millions of Americans, especially the working class, from an Uber driver in Chicago, a construction worker in Texas, to a retail employee in Atlanta, lottery ticket isn't just a simple game of chance. It becomes a lifeline out of poverty, an empty promise of an instant escape from a dead-end life, where every day is a tiring struggle with inflation, soaring living costs, and an ever-widening wealth gap. Think about Abraham Shakespeare, whom we mentioned in the introduction with his tragic story. He was once an ordinary truck driver in Florida, driving on the sun-drenched highways of the South. With a meager salary barely enough to cover daily expenses after gas and insurance. He believed money would solve all his problems, from mounting credit card debt to worries about his aging mother. Like so many other Americans, he bought lottery tickets not out of hobby, but with a single hope. One big hit to flip his life, in the spirit of Garage to Wall Street that Hollywood always celebrates. And this is the core of the jackpot illusion of fantasy, inflated by the lottery and media industries to a gigantic scale. They don't sell lottery tickets, they sell dreams. A luxurious vision where you wake up every morning with a bank account swollen with millions of dollars? Where every door of opportunity swings wide open, from stock investment to starting a business, and where life becomes an endless party with weekend barbecues and Super Bowl tickets. But behind that glittering facade, they deliberately ignore the harshest truth: the odds. That's a cold, unforgiving number, reminding us that the dream is for only one lucky person among the vast ocean of 330 million Americans. Did you know? The odds of winning the Powerball jackpot, one of the most famous lottery games in the US, are 1 in 292 million. That's not an abstract number. It's almost the same as getting struck by lightning twice in your life, or being attacked by a shark while surfing on a Florida beach. Yet despite those terrifying numbers, Americans still spend up to $100 billion on lotteries annually, according to data from research organizations like Gallup and the North American Association of State and Provincial Lotteries. And even more surprisingly, most of that money comes from low-income individuals, families in the Rust Belt or Appalachia, where the average income is only about $40,000 a year. People who should have used that money for organic food at Walmart or saved for their children's college fund. It's a never-ending cycle, an illusion fed by our own hope that anyone can get rich overnight. It's like a mental addiction, where each ticket is a temporary drug to soothe the pain of reality employment, divorce, or simply being tired of working overtime, but ultimately only makes you poorer. Contributing to an industry that generates massive profits for states and corporations like IGT. To add more allure and drama to this dream, lottery games worldwide are increasingly designed to be bigger, more attractive, and more diverse than ever. But in the US, they are the center of the craze. Have you ever heard of giant jackpots like Powerball or Mega Millions? These games aren't just local lotteries. They are national, even global, events that attract millions of participants from every corner of the US. Powerball, with its jackpot mechanism that rolls over with each drawing until someone wins, once reached a record $2.04 billion in 2022, when a lucky person in Altadena, California, took home the entire prize after taxes, changing his life forever. And just recently, in 2025, it set a new record with a $1.8 billion prize, becoming the second largest in history, making the entire US hold its breath as they watched on CNN and Fox News. With millions of people flocking to convenience stores from New York to Seattle, a notable feature of Powerball is the participation of 45 states plus Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, which causes the prize fund to accumulate extremely fast after just a few draws, turning it into a cultural phenomenon similar to an NBA final. Similarly, Mega Millions is no slouch. With a record jackpot of $1.602 billion in 2023, won by a single person in Florida's story that newspapers like the New York Times exploited to the fullest, turning him into a symbol of the modern American dream. But the jackpot dream journey doesn't stop at the US border. It spreads globally, influencing American players through international media stories. If you follow news from Europe, you'll be captivated by EuroMillions, a massive lottery alliance of 9 countries. From France to the UK, with a maximum jackpot of up to 250 million euros, often compared to Powerball on American Reddit forums. With each draw, millions of people from London to Lisbon rush to buy tickets, and major wins are often broadcast on ESPN or American podcasts, sparking envy and hope. Eurojackpot is even more ambitious, with the participation of 18 countries from Germany to Italy, designed to slightly improve the odds, but still maintaining its appeal with prizes that can reach hundreds of millions of euros, enough to make Americans dream of flying to Europe to try their luck. In Italy, people are passionate about Super Enalotto classic, but dramatic lottery game with an unlimited jackpot, which once reached 371 million euros in 2023, shaking the entire Italian peninsula and being spread by American travel bloggers as a European secret. And if you think of Oceania, Australia's Oz Lotto, with prizes often exceeding hundreds of millions of AUD, tracks players from Sydney to Melbourne and often appears in Forbes articles about the world's biggest jackpots, reminding Americans that the dream of wealth has no borders. All of these games create a global dream where borders seem not to exist, and everyone has a ticket to wealth, but behind the glamour, the odds of winning remain extremely low. For example, Euro Millions is only 1 in 139 million. Almost a miracle rather than a real opportunity, making it a cautionary tale for American players. The American media, as the main storyteller, has inflated these prizes into world-changing opportunities. They turn each drawing into a live television event on ABC or NBC. With images of beaming winners next to gigantic piles of money and inspiring rags to riches, stories published in the Wall Street Journal and spread on TikTok, news channels, social media, from Twitter to Instagram. And advertisements constantly emphasize the moment after winning lavish parties in Las Vegas. Generous gifts for friends, lives flipped from a trailer park to a penthouse but deliberately ignore the story of sweat and tears of ordinary workers before the win and the cold, hard odds. They sell us a ticket for just $2 at any gas station, but promise a life worth billions of dollars, fitting the American dream that everyone craves. It's like they're selling a book with a magnificent cover. It's featuring diamonds and yachts on the cover of Yachting magazine. But inside, there are only blank pages with no real formula to achieve that dream-only statistics on bankruptcy rates after winning the lottery. And we, the consumers of the dream, just buy in, because who doesn't want to believe in a miracle amid an unstable economy with increasing inflation and inequality? Now, let's be honest with ourselves for a moment, especially if you are an American watching this video. Have you ever dreamed of the Powerball or Mega Millions jackpot? Maybe during a sleepless night shift at an Amazon warehouse, you scrolled through the lottery.com app and saw the headline record jackpot about to explode on the CNN app, and then, with just a few clicks, you bought a ticket for fun, imagining buying back your childhood home in the Midwest. Have you ever felt the extreme excitement waiting for the results? Your heart pounding with each ball drawn on the TV screen amid the lively commentary of the hosts? Those moments, however brief, bring a rare sense of freedom, as if you hold the key to a secret door leading to true financial independence. Will that dream be sustainable when you have to face the IRS demanding up to 37% in taxes, or relatives suddenly returning to ask for a share? Are you ready to face everything that will happen afterward, from the sudden attention of paparazzi? It's confusing financial advice from self-proclaimed consultants, to the pressure of maintaining wealth in a world full of traps like lawsuits and bad investments? Or will it quickly vanish like sea foam on a Miami beach, leaving you with a bigger void than ever, just like the thousands of other lottery winners who went bankrupt in just a few years? You see, the jackpot illusion has drawn millions of Americans into an inescapable vortex, where hope becomes a shackle, and it is reinforced by a social system that worships quick wealth. It's not just a game of chance, it's a part of American consumer culture, where poverty is exploited to create massive profits for states from California to New York and lottery corporations, while social programs are cut. But when the jackpot really comes rare and fragile as a shooting star, the harsh truth truly begins. The tragic stories we've heard are just the tip of the iceberg, and they remind us that the true American dream lies in perseverance, education, and smart investment, not in a random number. The next part will take us deeper into the real consequences, where the dream collides with reality, and we will explore how to build a more solid future, based not on luck, but on real action. Sudden riches and bitter collapse if. Part 1 was about the empty promise of a dream, the lottery tickets glittering under the neon lights of convenience stores. It's promising a golden life just a few dollars away. Then Part 2 is when we must strip away that shiny shell to face the raw, harsh reality. These are not fairy tales with happy endings, but real-life tragedies, where money not only fails to solve old problems, but also sows the seeds for new, deeper tragedies. We will delve into true stories from America's sorrowful films recorded through local news, heartbreaking interviews on CNN, and long-form articles in the New York Times about the journey from fleeting glory to the abyss of despair, bankruptcy, and even death. Each story is a resounding warning, a suspended sentence hanging over the heads of those who suddenly become millionaires. A reminder that sudden wealth can be more of a curse than a blessing. In America, where the dream of wealth is celebrated through Hollywood and reality TV, these tragedies become even more bitter because they shatter the illusion that anyone can succeed overnight. Let's begin this painful journey with one of America's most classic stories. Jack Whittaker, a man once hailed as a symbol of the American dream, but who ultimately became its victim. In 2002, in a small town in West Virginia where old coal mines are still a symbol of manual labor, Jack Whittaker, a 55-year-old construction businessman with a stable but not lavish life, changed his fate forever. He bought a $2 Powerball ticket at a local gas station, and just a few days later, he was announced as the winner of a $315 million jackpot, the largest jackpot in U.S. history at the time, surpassing all previous records. The whole world converged on him. News broadcasts on ABC and NBC showed images of a smiling Jack next to a gigantic pile of money, and the media hailed him as a real-life Santa Claus, an ordinary man from poor Appalachia, who suddenly became a symbol of luck and kindness. Jack chose to take the lump sum payment, about $113 million after taxes. And at first, everything was beautiful, promising a fulfilling life just like the American dream. He immediately used a portion of the money for charity. He built a new church for the local community, donated millions of dollars to flood relief organizations in the Midwest, and helped hundreds of poor families by paying off their medical debts or buying them homes. He even hosted large community parties where people came from all over to share in his joy. And Jack was invited for an interview on the Oprah Winfrey Show, where he shared, "This money is for helping people, not for changing me." At that moment, everyone thought he was a true winner and inspiring story for millions of Americans struggling with bills and second jobs. But then, like a Greek tragedy, the calamities began to strike just a few months later. Money wasn't a key to open all doors. It turned Jack into a magnet for trouble, attracting all kinds of villains from across American society. He was sued more than 400 times in the first 2 years alone, from old acquaintances demanding a share because they had suggested he'd buy a ticket, to civil lawsuits from former employees claiming he owed them wages, and even lawsuits from strangers who claimed he had caused them an accident before he was rich. Lawyers swarmed him like a broken hive, turning his peaceful life in West Virginia into a prolonged legal nightmare. Then, a series of thefts occurred. On one occasion, while Jack was attending a church service, thieves broke into his SUV and stole $545,000 in cash money he was carrying to give to the poor, which was later found scattered on the highway. He increased security, hired bodyguards, and installed cameras all over his house. But the wealth had destroyed his privacy, turning him into a target for tabloid media and paparazzi. His long-standing marriage to his wife Jewel, who had been with him through hard times, also fell apart after many years together. She couldn't bear the pressure of rumors and her husband's sudden changes, leading to a costly divorce with a property dispute that lasted for years. But the peak of his pain, what truly shattered Jack Whittaker, was the irreplaceable personal losses. His beloved granddaughter, Brandy Braga, bright young girl with a promising future, died from a drug overdose in 2004, just 2 years after he won the lottery, in part due to the pressure of sudden attention and endless party invitations. Later, his daughter Ginger, who was always his emotional support, also died mysteriously in 2009 from health issues related to stress and addiction. Jack Whittaker, once the king of the jackpot, now sat alone in his large, now empty house. Once saying in a rare interview with the Charleston Gazette-Mail, his voice trembling with ultimate grief, "I wish I had torn up that ticket right when I bought it. It brought no happiness, only pain and loss." From a community hero, he became a lonely victim, living in seclusion with sleepless nights and debts from lawsuits, proving that wealth can be a more vicious curse than anything else. The story of Abraham Shakespeare is no less tragic. and it took place right in the heart of sunny Florida state, famous for lottery wins and strange murders. In 2006, Abraham, a 38-year-old black truck driver from Lakeland, with a life centered around long hauls and a meager salary, just enough to support his family, decided to try his luck with a $1 Lotto Florida ticket. The result? He won a $30 million jackpot. A colossal sum for a man who once lived in a trailer park and worried about rent. Abraham chose to take the lump sum payment, about $17 million after taxes, and at first, he became a local hero. He generously helped friends and family. He bought a new house for his mother, paid tuition for his nieces and nephews, and even established a small charitable foundation to support poor children in the Tallahassee area. Local newspapers like the Tampa Bay Times hailed him as the kind man from the lottery dream, and Abraham appeared on local radio shows sharing that this money is to change everyone's life, not just mine. He bought a shiny Cadillac SUV, a large house with a swimming pool, and dreamed of starting a small business all fitting the image of a black American rising from poverty. But that genuine generosity attracted the most dangerous predator, Dee Dee Moore, a 35-year-old woman with a charming appearance and sweet words, who approached Abraham through a local charity event. Moore, who had a history of small-time fraud, quickly became his close friend, convincing him she could better manage his assets from investing in real estate to handling loans. Abraham, a man who grew up in an environment where trust was rare, trusted her blindly. He transferred control of a portion of his assets, signed a contract for her to manage the charity fund, and even let her live in his house. Moore took advantage of this to gradually withdraw his money, spending it on designer clothes, cars, and luxurious trips under the guise of investment while Abraham became increasingly isolated, losing his true friends due to rumors. She even tricked him into signing a contract to write a book about his life, Chai Money, a lottery winner's hardest fight, but instead of benefiting him, the book only exposed his naivety and attracted more villains. The tragic climax occurred in 2009. Abraham disappeared after a meeting with Moore, and his body was found 6 months later, buried under a concrete slab in a friend's backyard, shot and gagged to conceal the crime. Moore was sentenced to life in prison for murder and robbery, and her trial, widely broadcast on Court TV, revealed she had stolen more than $1 million from him before killing him. His story of Abraham Shakespeare, from a hopeful truck driver to a betrayed victim, is a chilling warning about blind trust in an American society where sudden wealth turns you into prey for influence hunters and scammers, especially for those from minority communities who are already accustomed to suspicion. Turning to Texas, the state of oil fields and cowboy dreams, we meet Billy Bob Harrell Jr., another story that illustrates the invisible weight of wealth. In 1997, Billy Bob, father of two working at Home Depot in Houston, with a salary of about $40,000 a year, bought a Lotto Texas ticket during his lunch break. He won a $31 million jackpot, and like many other Americans, he chose to take the lump sum payment, about $17 million after taxes. At first, everything was like a romantic comedy. He bought a large house in the suburbs with a tennis court, a brand new Ford pickup truck, and organized the family's first trip to Las Vegas. He generously shared his money with friends and family, paying off cousins' debts, buying cars for high school friends, and even donating to the local church. Texas newspapers like the Houston Chronicle published photos of him smiling with his wife and children, calling him the luckiest man in Texas, and Billy Bob appeared on local talk shows saying, "I just want everyone around me to be happy." Life seemed perfect, with weekend barbecues and plans to open a small store. But then an invisible pressure began to weigh on his shoulders like a Texas storm. Everyone from old neighbors to strangers constantly demanded money. Lend me some to fix my car, invest in my business idea, or simply, "You're rich now, help me out." It's the nonstop phone calls, mandatory parties, and whispers about his obligations made Billy Bob feel used, like a living ATM instead of a friend. This pressure spread to his family. His wife Barbara began to complain about the changes. Small arguments became big, leading to a divorce just 1 year later. He gradually lost his true friends due to rumors of his stinginess, and his attempts to invest in real estate failed due to a lack of experience, leading to huge losses. The extreme stress made him return to alcohol and smoking, old habits from his days of hard labor. Just 20 months after winning the lottery, a fleeting moment compared to an eternal dream, Billy Bob was found to have taken his own life with a gun in his now empty house in 1999. At the age of 38, in a suicide note to a friend, he wrote shaky words: "Winning the lottery is the worst thing that ever happened to me. I just want to go back to my old life, where everything was simple." His story, retold in documentaries like the Lottery Losers podcast on Spotify, is a painful testament to how wealth can destroy the most precious relationships, turning a devoted father into a victim of his own kindness and social expectations. Beyond these famous tragedy stories that Hollywood has turned into Netflix documentaries, there are many other cases in the US and internationally that repeat the same quick rise, quick fall pattern, like a predestined cycle of sudden wealth. These stories are not random. They've been studied by psychologists at places like the University of California, Berkeley, who show that 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within 7 years. Let's look at some typical examples. Laura and Roger Griffiths in the US. This couple might be reminiscent of smaller winners, but their story from England accurately reflects the American tragedy. They bought a dream house in a New Jersey-style coastal town, took luxurious trips to the Bahamas, and spent uncontrollably on yachts and jewelry. The result? A house fire due to carelessness that burned everything down without adequate insurance, leading to mounting debt. They had a bitter divorce and went bankrupt in 2013. Now living in a small rented apartment, a reminder that luxury without a foundation often leads to disaster. David Lee Edwards, a pure American story, from Kentucky in 2001. When he, a former drug-addicted ex-convict with not a dime to his name, won $27 million from Powerball. He bought a 7-bedroom mansion in Ashland, a private Cessna jet to fly to Vegas casinos, and dozens of cars from Ferraris to Hummers. But his old addiction returned like a flood. Cocaine, gambling, and toxic relationships devoured his assets. Within 5 years, he lost everything, was divorced 3 times, and died in poverty at the age of 51 in 2013, living in a broken-down RV, proof that the past doesn't forgive easy wealth. Mickey Carroll. Although from the UK with £9.7 million in 2002, his story is exactly like that of young American lottery winners. He blew the money on wild parties at Miami-style clubs, drugs, and prostitutes, bought a Lamborghini, and threw parties that lasted for weeks. Just 8 years later, completely bankrupt, he had to work as a street cleaner, and now as a coal miner at age 40. Outcome that reminds us that youth plus money often equals chaos without an escape. These stories from the US to Europe show a common pattern: impulsive spending leading to debt, thoughtless investments causing losses, and social isolation that turns you into an enemy of your own community. These stories create a painful contrast, piercing straight to the heart of the American dream. Most of these people, before winning the lottery, had normal, even difficult lives. Truck drivers worried about bills, Home Depot workers on night shifts, or ex-cons looking for a new start. They weren't playboys. They were honest workers who dreamed of stability, not luxury. But when they had a gigantic sum of money in their hands coming too fast, without warning, they lacked the psychological and financial preparation to handle it. The money came like a sugar-coated poison, sweet at first but deadly later on. It made them lose their daily clarity, lose their reason with each decision, and lose the most precious things. Family broken by envy, friends turning their backs because of demands, and their own selves collapsing under the pressure. Financial experts like Sue Zorman on CNBC often warn that sudden wealth is like being poisoned. It kills what you love most. Common mistakes, from thoughtless luxury purchases to sharing money without boundaries, lead to a domino effect: debt from credit cards, lawsuits from relatives, and finally bankruptcy or worse. These stories are not rare isolated cases, but a common pattern repeated thousands of times each year in the US. according to data from the National Endowment for Financial Education. From extravagant shopping on Rodeo Drive to financial management mistakes like investing in higher-risk stocks, from the breakdown of family relationships to the return of bad habits like addiction or gambling, all lead to the same outcome: total collapse, often in just 3 to 5 years. It's not just about losing money, it's about losing hope, losing dignity, and sometimes losing life. Now ask yourself, especially if you're sitting in a suburban living room or a New York City apartment watching this video, if you won $100 million from Powerball tomorrow, what would you do first? Buy a dream house for your parents in Florida, pay off all your student loans, or invest in an S&P 500 index fund? Would you share it with friends without thinking about taxes and lawyers? This question is not meant to be judgmental, but to help us better understand how humans react when faced with sudden wealth, a deep psychological topic that researchers like Daniel Kahneman have explored in Thinking Fast and Slow. The next part will delve into the science behind those decisions. From sudden wealth syndrome to how to build a practical plan to turn a dream into a sustainable reality instead of a fleeting tragedy. Sudden wealth syndrome and the mental trap. After witnessing the heartbreaking tragedies in the previous part from Jack Whittaker, sitting alone in his vast house now filled only with the echoes of loss, to Abraham Shakespeare betrayed to his death under a cold concrete slab, and Billy Bob Harrell Jr. ending his life with a gunshot from his own hand, you must have asked yourself, especially if you're an American struggling with monthly bills in the heartland, why did these people lose everything, even though they had the money that others dream of for a lifetime, enough to buy a ranch in Texas or a penthouse in Manhattan? The answer doesn't lie in simple mistakes like extravagant spending on a Ferrari or a trip to Vegas, nor in failed investments in meme stocks on Robinhood. It's hidden deep within their own minds, in the wrinkles of their brains, and the nerve fibers that were suddenly stretched. It's a real psychological phenomenon, widely recognized by psychologists and financial experts, called sudden wealth syndrome. This concept was popularized by Stephen Goldbart and Joan DeFuria, two psychologists at Stanford University. Through their book, The Sudden Wealth Solution in 2000, based on hundreds of case studies from lottery winners, unexpected heirs, or those who sold startup companies. In America, where the culture of quick wealth is worshipped through shows like Shark Tank and Rags to Riches stories in Forbes, this syndrome is not only common, but is also considered an invisible trap of the American dream, turning winners into victims of their own brains. Imagine you are driving your old pickup truck on Interstate 95 from Florida to New York, on a familiar road with McDonald's rest stops and glittering lottery billboards. Then suddenly, an invisible vortex lifts you up and transports you to another planet where the air is thinner. Gravity is reversed, and all the physical laws you once knew are broken. That is the feeling of winning a Powerball or Mega Millions jackpot. A seismic shift from daily life morning coffee at Starbucks, a 9-to-5 office job, and worrying about mortgage payments to a world where money flows like the Mississippi River, without limits and without warning. The money comes too fast. Too is alleged just from a $2 ticket bought in a hurry at a gas station that their brains cannot adapt in time. Like an old computer forced to run advanced software without enough RAM. This sudden change causes a psychological state of overwhelm, activating the limbic system, the part of the brain that controls emotions and survival responses, leading to internal storms. And like a gigantic mirror placed in the Nevada desert, money doesn't create new problems. It magnifies everything that already existed. Survival instincts from a poor childhood in Appalachia, personality traits formed over decades of manual labor, and even hidden fears like abandonment or failure. The result? What were once small cracks in the personality now become seismic fissures, leading to a complete collapse. Studies from the American Psychological Association show that about 70% of people with sudden wealth experience at least one symptom of this syndrome in the first year, with the divorce rate doubling and depression increasing by 40% compared to the average population. Sudden wealth syndrome is not an abstract concept or a media joke. It is a real psychological disorder, diagnosed through clear and frightening symptoms, similar to PTSD after a trauma. Financial therapists in the US, such as those at the Money, Meaning, and Choices Institute in California, often list them as a checklist for new patients. Sadly, most lottery winners check at least 3 boxes. Let's delve deeper into these symptoms with examples from the very tragic stories we've learned, to see how they infiltrate the daily lives of an ordinary American who suddenly becomes a millionaire. Paranoia. This is the most common symptom, affecting over 60% of cases according to a Harvard University study. Lottery winners often live in constant fear of being scammed, being exploited by self-proclaimed consultants on LinkedIn, or being robbed by strangers tracking them through social media. They begin to distrust everyone, even their closest relatives and friends, from a cousin who suddenly calls after years of silence to old neighbors, now staring over the fence. Jack Whitaker is a typical, heartbreakingly classic example. After winning $315 million in 2002, he became so paranoid that he had to keep a Glock pistol in his pickup truck's trunk and live in constant anxiety, checking his security cameras every hour. In a 2008 interview with the West Virginia Record, he confessed, "I don't know who my friends are anymore. Everyone wants a piece of my pie, and I'm afraid they'll slit my throat to get it." This paranoia not only destroyed his sleep but also led to poor decisions, such as refusing to help those who truly needed it, turning him from a community businessman into a fearful recluse in his own home. Social isolation. Money turns you into an island in the ocean. And many lottery winners cut themselves off from society to avoid fake friends, money hunters who appear like mushrooms after rain on Facebook or at charity events. They abandon old relationships, weekend barbecues with high school friends, or family dinners around the table to live a closed-off and lonely life in their own wealth, often moving to gated mansions in Beverly Hills or Palm Springs. This isolation leads to a deep sense of emptiness and loneliness, even though they have millions of dollars in an infinity pool overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Research from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology shows that social isolation increases the risk of depression by 50% in this group. Billy Bob Harold Jr. is a living testament. After winning $31 million, gradually withdrew from his circle of friends in Houston, avoiding gatherings for fear of being bled dry by money requests, leading to the extreme loneliness that contributed to his decision to take his own life in 1999. Barbara, his ex-wife, later said in a Texas Monthly article, "He had everything, but he had no one left. The big house was filled only with the sound of the wind." Guilt, a lesser-known but equally common symptom, especially in Americans raised with Christian values or the pull-yourself-up-by-your-bootstraps mentality, feeling guilty for suddenly becoming rich while their loved ones still struggle to make ends meet with 2 jobs at Walmart or driving Uber late at night. The feeling of "why am I lucky and others aren't?" haunts them like a ghost, making them want to give away all the money to relieve this moral burden, often leading to extravagant spending or uncontrolled loans. This partly explains the excessive generosity of Billy Bob Harold Jr., who gave away millions of dollars to relatives and friends without legal contracts, leading to him being bled dry and ultimately going bankrupt in just 20 months, according to psychologist Robert Kenney, author of The 1% Solution. This guilt stems from survivor's guilt, the survival of oneself amid surrounding poverty, and it can lead to severe depression if not treated with cognitive behavioral therapy. Personality amplification. Money is like a high-power amplifier at a rock concert in Madison Square Garden. It amplifies every personality trait, turning strengths into deadly weaknesses. If a person is naturally generous, like Jack Whitaker with his tradition of charity in West Virginia, they can become extravagant and out of control, spending millions on community projects without a financial plan. Conversely, a person who is already greedy or isolated can become even more cruel and calculating, cutting off all relationships to protect their empire. Whitaker's generosity turned into a weakness when he was overwhelmed by lawsuits. The naive kindness of Abraham Shakespeare, a trusting truck driver, turned into a deadly trap when he trusted D.D. Moore, leading to the murder in 2009. Researchers at the Yale School of Management note that this amplification often occurs because money activates dopamine, the pleasure hormone, making the brain prioritize short-term rewards over long-term reason. Besides the core symptoms, our brains designed through millions of years of evolution to survive in an environment of scarcity also react to sudden wealth in incredibly dangerous and unpredictable ways. Money is seen as unlimited, like a tap turned wide open in the Mojave Desert, stimulating the brain's reward center, releasing a flood of dopamine that leads to impulsive and thoughtless behaviors. Impulsively shopping on Amazon Prime, betting on sports on DraftKings, or blindly investing in crypto without reading the white paper. This explains why many lottery winners have higher rates of depression and addiction than the average population, up to 30%, according to data from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They try to fill a spiritual void with temporary material pleasures from partying on Miami Beach to collecting vintage cars, but then sink deeper into the abyss of emptiness, because dopamine quickly runs out, leaving a bigger void. David Lee Edwards, a former drug addict who won $27 million in 2001, is a painful and classic American example. When he got the money, instead of using it to change his life, like entering a rehabilitation program at the Betty Ford Center or learning financial management, he used it to satisfy old addictions, buying large quantities of cocaine and a private jet to fly to Atlantic City casinos. The money didn't help him escape the demons within him, the memories from his time in a Kentucky prison, but on the contrary, provided more fuel for those demons to grow stronger. Week-long parties, toxic relationships, and finally, bankruptcy in 2006. In a final interview with the Lexington Herald Leader, he whispered, "Money just made everything worse. It woke up monsters I thought were asleep." His story, retold in the HBO documentary Broke, is a reminder that wealth doesn't heal old wounds. It only temporarily covers them before they explode. Ultimately, money is not the root cause of these tragedies. It is only a catalyst, a powerful litmus test that exposes pre-existing issues in each person's soul, like a massive storm that sweeps away the protective shell of a rotting house in Tornado Alley. It reveals weaknesses from the past, like the fear of poverty from the Great Depression that grandparents talked about, or the deep-seated desire for recognition that a daily job never satisfies, amplifies them to an uncontrollable degree. Perhaps that is why many lottery winners don't just lose money, but also lose themselves. They become strangers to themselves, to the values that once shaped their lives, from the honesty of a Home Depot worker to the resilience of a truck driver through Midwest snowstorms. They wander through empty mansions, looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person reflected back, because wealth has turned them into a distorted version of themselves. So the big question, not just for lottery winners, but for all of us, Americans dreaming of a big Powerball prize amid inflation and economic instability, is not, can money buy happiness? Because the answer is obviously no. According to long-term studies like the Harvard Grant study, it is, does money change you? Or in other words, does it only expose your true self, the fears, desires, and weaknesses that you have buried beneath the surface of daily life? Are you mentally strong enough, with support from a therapist or a trusted community, to face the temptations, social pressures from media and social networks, and the negative emotions that come with sudden wealth? This is the most profound lesson that the tragic stories of Jack, Abraham, Billy Bob, and David provide. True wealth is not in the number in the bank account, but in the ability to control your mind before its storm. The next part will shift from tragedy to hope, exploring practical strategies from financial planning with a CFP consultant to building a support network to turn a jackpot into a foundation for a meaningful, sustainable life, instead of a fleeting flame that burns everything down. The social curse, money, and the predators. After delving into the internal storms of sudden wealth syndrome in the previous part, where brains are overloaded with dopamine, paranoia, turning lottery winners into prisoners of their own minds, we cannot stop there. Because money doesn't just gnaw from within, it also spreads outward like a social virus, shattering the relationships that we consider the foundation of American life. family gathering around the Thanksgiving table, friends hanging out at a Super Bowl party, or video calls with cousins in the Midwest. This is the least talked about dark side of winning a Powerball or Mega Millions jackpot. Money turns you into a magnet for predators from your closest circle family, friends, and even strangers on Wall Street or local Facebook groups. Have you ever wondered if you won $500 million on a rainy Saturday night in Ohio? Would you dare to tell anyone? Or would you keep it a national secret, change your phone number, move to a small town in Montana, and live with the fear that the greatest joy of your life could destroy everything you love? In America, where individualism is a core value, but wealth is coveted by society like a gigantic piece of pie. This social curse is not just a risk, it's an inevitable rule. It's documented through thousands of stories, from local news to sociological studies at the University of Chicago. You wake up after the lottery drawing, your bank account is swollen like a helium balloon. And instead of cheers, you receive a flood of messages, calls, and fake hugs. Money doesn't just change you, it changes the way people see you, from an insurance salesman in Denver to the lifeline of an entire town. Sociologists like Elizabeth Curd-Halkett, in The Sum of Small Things, describe this phenomenon as the social magnet effect. Sudden wealth creates a field of force that attracts expectations, envy, and greed, often leading to the collapse of the social network you've built over decades. And in the American context, where the wealth gap is widening with 1% of the population controlling 40% of the assets, according to data from the Federal Reserve, lottery winners become perfect targets for a society that sees wealth as a ticket to respect and recognition. Pressure from family and friends. When a person wins the lottery, they don't just become financially rich. They become the center of a social storm, with huge waves of demands and expectations crashing in from those around them, often starting with the most familiar faces. Billy Bob Harrell Jr., the Texas father we met in the previous part, is a prime example of how the American pull-up-your-neighbor generosity can turn into a deadly burden. After winning $31 million from Lotto Texas in 1997, Billy Bob, a humble Home Depot worker with a warm smile and strong Christian faith, became excessively generous. As if he were living in the American neighbor dreams celebrated in Hallmark movies, he bought new pickup trucks for his cousins, paid off the mortgage for his elderly parents in rural Houston, built a small community church with a playground for local children, and even sponsored a Disney World trip for his neighbors. He also shared money with his high school friends, the same ones he used to drink Bud Light with after work, by giving interest-free loans or large birthday gifts. At first, everything was like a big barbecue party. Laughter echoed, and posts on Facebook praised him as a Texas hero. But that generosity quickly turned into an unbearable burden. The pressure from his relatives, from "Hey bro, can I borrow $50K to fix the roof after the storm?" to "Dad needs a new car because the old one is broken," became a constant flow, with midnight calls and family dinners turning into demanding tribunals. He was financially bled dry little by little. Loans that were never repaid, failed joint investments, and a brother-in-law's vague business idea, and ever-growing expectations that he had to share God's portion. This not only led to financial stress, with millions of dollars disappearing in just 18 months, but also tore apart his marriage to Barbara, who felt marginalized as their home became a charitable foundation's headquarters. Arguments escalated from small things like, "Why did you give him $100K without asking me?" to sleepless nights, leading to a bitter divorce in 1998. Billy Bob once confessed to a close friend in his final letter, "I felt like a mobile ATM, not a husband or a father anymore." His story, retold in detail in the Heavy Metal podcast by WBUR, illustrates how American social pressure, where family and community are safety nets, can turn into a constricting spiderweb, making lottery winners feel trapped, not knowing how to say no without hurting feelings or being labeled as stingy. Many other lottery winners in the U.S. share similar experiences, according to a survey from the National Association of Unclaimed Property Administrators. More than 80% reported receiving at least 50 financial requests in the first year, mostly from relatives. Old friends suddenly call back after years of silence, not to ask "How are you?" after the surgery, but only to start the conversation with, "Hey, I heard you won the lottery. I've got a great business idea." Family members, from distant cousins in Alabama to aunts and uncles in in California, also begin to make demands, turning family gatherings into tense negotiations with phrases like, "You're rich now. Help our family out. It's a waste to just let the money sit there." This pressure is not just financial, it's emotional, making lottery winners feel used, subtly envied, and forced into the role of a savior they never asked for. An anonymous lottery winner from Michigan, interviewed on NPR in 2019, described it, "I love my family, but now every call is a time bomb. I'm afraid to pick up the phone because I know it will end with just a little bit." The result is that conflicts escalate into permanent rifts, siblings cut off contact, friends disappear when they are turned down, creating a cycle of loneliness amid apparent wealth. The breakdown doesn't just stop at financial matters or petty requests. Money changes the core dynamics of relationships, turning bonds into constricting ropes. A genuine friendship, sharing stories of heartbreak over a can of Coors while watching an Astros game at Minute Maid Park, can turn into a subtle auction of kindness and generosity, where the old friend begins to compare, "I was with you when you were poor. Now that you're rich. What about me?" A strong family bond, with traditions like Thanksgiving turkey barbecues or summer camping in the Ozarks, can collapse due to subtle envy and exploding greed. Brother feels left out because he didn't get a large share. Or a sister starts whispering venomous words in the family group chat. Lottery winners often feel isolated in their own homes because they can't trust anyone. Is the wife who stays with them there for love or for the joint bank account? Is the best friend really happy for them, or just waiting for a chance to borrow some money? They fear that the people who stay are only there for the money, leading to self-imposed distant silent dinners, solo trips to a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, and eventually divorce at a rate of up to 70%, according to research from the Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards. Even those not directly winning the lottery, but related to a winner, also suffer the ripple effect of this social curse. Consider Thomas Markle, the father of Meghan Markle's story, closer to Hollywood, but accurately reflecting the tragedy of smaller lottery winners in America. In 1970, Thomas, a lighting technician in Hollywood with a middle-class life in Encino, California, won the California lottery for about $750,000. He used the money to buy a bigger house, new cars, and support his family, including helping Meghan and her sister Samantha with tuition and gifts. But then he went bankrupt due to uncontrolled spending, failed real estate investments, loans to relatives, and pressure from the Hollywood media that turned him into the rich dad of future stars. Although he wasn't a gigantic jackpot winner like Powerball, his story revealed through interviews in People magazine and the Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan shows that money, whether a little or a lot, can create a social curse, cracking family relationships. Thomas and Meghan are now estranged. Public accusations about his interference in his daughter's life, proving that wealth can turn a father and daughter into strangers, especially in an American society where media amplifies every family drama into a national scandal. Becoming a social target when a person goes public with their wealth of fan through local news reports like local resident wins record Powerball. On an ABC affiliate, they immediately become a target for all of society, not just family, but also from larger forces, lawyers, charities, and even street criminals. Jack Whitaker, the West Virginia businessman we know, is a classic victim of this. After winning $315 million in 2002, he was sued over 400 times in just 3 years, a colossal number that forced him to hire a team of lawyers at a cost of millions of dollars. The lawsuits came from all sides. Strangers claiming he caused a fake car accident before he was rich, former employees demanding fair compensation, local charities suing because he promised donations but didn't follow through, and even a small church accusing him of charity fraud. Although many of the lawsuits were baseless and dismissed, they still caused extreme stress trials that lasted for months. Paperwork piling up like snow in Appalachia, and legal bills that devoured $10 million. Whitaker once said in an article in the Washington Post, "I can't walk down the street without being afraid someone will sue me for looking at them the wrong way." At the same time, he had to face the real risk of theft. Just a few months after winning, Thieves broke into his SUV at a church and stole $545,000 in cash money he was carrying to give to the poor, which was later found scattered on Interstate 64. Although he was rich, constantly living in fear, having to hire a bodyguard 24/7 at a cost of $5,000 a week. Installing a complex security system with infrared cameras and electric fences, and even changing his home address, robbed him of the peace he once had in the small town of Salt Rock. Ultimately, wealth turned him from a normal person who enjoyed weekend fishing into a walking target. Living in constant anxiety and paranoia, where every doorbell ring was a potential threat, reports from the FBI show that major lottery winners in the U.S. have a 5x higher risk of being robbed. And Whitaker is just one of hundreds of cases. A reminder that American society, with its easily abused legal system and sue-happy culture, turns a jackpot into an invitation to chaos. Now, let's bring the issue back to you, the person watching this video. Perhaps sitting in a rented apartment in Chicago or a suburban house in Atlanta, dreaming of a Powerball ticket amid soaring gas prices. Would you tell anyone if you won the lottery? Or would you keep it a secret like a CIA agent, only sharing it with a trusted lawyer and financial advisor? This question is not easy to answer, and it touches the core of the American identity. Individual independence versus community values. Keeping it a secret means you have to live with a heavy burden, like carrying an invisible backpack full of gold and able to share the joy with your spouse, able to show off to friends without worrying about being exposed, and having to act every day as if life is still normal, leading to chronic stress, according to research from the Mayo Clinic. Telling people means you will face the full social curse. Predators from family to society, lawsuits, and isolation as people change. Many lottery winners have chosen to keep it a secret or remain anonymous. In some states like Delaware or Kansas, you can request to remain anonymous to protect themselves and their families. Like the case of the $758 million Powerball winner in New Hampshire in 2017, who sued the government to remain secret and won the case. However, this secrecy also causes a certain isolation. They cannot share the explosive joy, the anxiety about the 37% IRS tax bill, or the difficulties of choosing a consultant without fear of being exposed. This creates a vicious cycle of loneliness. You're rich but have no one to celebrate with. It's like winning the Super Bowl without any fans. The advice from experts like Ramit Sethian, I will teach. You to be rich is to create a small circle of trust, just 3 to 5 people, including a lawyer and a therapist, and use an anonymous charity fund to help others without revealing yourself. But in the end, there is no perfect solution. There is only preparation. You see, money is just a tool, a hammer that can build a house or break a knee. But when it's introduced into a relationship, it can reveal the deepest truths. The greed hidden beneath the veneer of friendship, the subtle envy in a family's smile, or the fragility of trust. It doesn't kill relationships. It only exposes the cracks that have long existed. Small inequalities from childhood, unstated expectations about American success. Billy Bob Harrell Jr. didn't take his own life because he lost money, but because he couldn't bear the pressure and the breakdown of the relationships that were. Once his support system in Texas, Abraham Shakespeare didn't die because of money, but because he trusted the wrong person in a society full of predators from Florida to Wall Street. Society is only a part of the problem. Magnifying mirror, but money became a deadly trap, and the mistakes in managing it, from blind sharing to a lack of boundaries, pushed them to the brink. The next part will shift from social darkness to practical light, specific strategies to protect your jackpot, from setting up a trust to building a meaningful life. Turning a curse into a legacy, because in America, the real dream is not to win the lottery, but to control your own fate. Financial traps, the deadly mistakes after exploring the social wounds in the previous part, where family members become predators. Friends become demanding, and American society, with its sue-happy legal system, turns a jackpot into an invitation to chaos. We cannot ignore the final layer of tragedy, the real financial traps. where money is not just a number on a bank statement, but a maze full of pitfalls. Designed by a lack of preparation and human greed, money is not just a mirror that reflects human nature or a magnet that attracts predators from a family circle in suburban Atlanta to lawyers in Washington, D.C. It is also a maze full of financial traps, where one wrong decision, whether it's a single click on an investment app or a signature on a loan agreement, can lead to a faster collapse than a tornado in Tornado Alley. This is when we must face the real mistakes that most Powerball or Mega Millions jackpot winners make, according to data from the Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards. They may not lack money, millions of dollars flowing into their Chase or Wells Fargo accounts, but they lack basic knowledge about taxes, investment, and financial discipline. Often because they grew up in working-class families in the Rust Belt or Midwest, where saving meant putting money in a piggy bank instead of an ETF fund. In America, where the average student debt is $37,000 and inflation is eating away at the wallets of millions of households, these mistakes are not just personal tragedies, they are a cautionary tale for anyone dreaming of sudden wealth. From an Amazon employee in Seattle to an Uber driver in Miami, imagine you're driving a truck through the Nevada desert, the $1 billion Powerball jackpot in hand, but instead of a straight highway, you get lost in a maze full of quicksand and mirages. That's the financial world of a lottery winner. Experts like Dave Ramsey on his radio show often call this the lottery curse effect. 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within 7 years. Not because they lacked money initially, but because they rushed into impulsive decisions without a map, lacking a CFP consultant, tax plan, and an understanding of how money multiplies instead of flowing out like water. Now, let's dive into the most deadly traps with examples from the very tragic stories we've learned to see how they turn the American dream into a bankruptcy nightmare. This is one of the first and most important decisions a lottery winner must face right after the last ball drops on the ABC live TV stage. Take the entire amount in a single payment or receive it in annual installments, a choice that most people, from a viewer at a local bar to an online player on lottery.com, think is as easy as pie. But in reality, the lump sum option, which sounds so appealing, I can immediately buy my dream house in the Florida Keys and pay off all my credit card debt, is a deadly trap designed to exploit the brain's impulsiveness after a dopamine rush. When taking the lump sum, the winner is subject to an immediate federal income tax of 24 to 37%. Plus, state taxes ranging from 0% in Texas to 10.9% in New York, which can leave the actual amount received at only about half of the advertised jackpot value. For example, a $1 billion Powerball jackpot might only bring in $400 to $500 million after taxes in then. With a gigantic pile of money in hand, they lose control. They spend impulsively at Vegas casinos, lend money to friends without documentation, or blindly invest in crypto without reading the white paper. A study from the American Institute of CPAs shows that 90% of those who choose the lump sum go bankrupt faster than those who choose annuity, because it creates an illusion of endless money without a safety barrier. In contrast, choosing the annual payment, usually for 20 to 30 years, depending on the rules of the Multi-State Lottery Association, provides a stable income stream, like a Social Security pension but much larger, reduces the tax burden by spreading the income over time, and creates a safety barrier against immediate overspending. You can't burn through $50 million a year if you only receive $30 million a year, forcing you to learn how to live within a budget, a lesson that most Americans with sudden wealth lack. Unfortunately, many lottery winners don't get professional advice from a tax lawyer or financial advisor. From the start, they rush to choose the lump sum because they want immediate freedom and end up losing everything, like Jack Whitaker in 2002. He chose to take $113 million at once from the $315 million Powerball. And after just 5 years, most of it had vanished through lawsuits and spending, leaving him with sleepless nights in West Virginia. According to a report from NASPL, only 20% of winners choose annuity, and they have a 60% lower bankruptcy rate number that reminds us that the first decision can shape an entire life. With a gigantic amount of money enough to buy a small baseball team or sponsor a local election, many lottery winners fall into the most common mistake: uncontrolled spending. Getting caught in the syndrome of excessive generosity that financial psychologists call giving syndrome, where American-style pay-it-forward kindness turns into financial suicide. They buy houses much larger than they need, from a 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago to a 10,000 square feet mansion in Beverly Hills, with an infinity pool, in a private movie theater, expensive luxury cars like a Lamborghini, Aventador, or a limited edition Tesla Cybertruck, and host extravagant parties at Miami resorts with DJs and Dom Perignon champagne flowing like water. Billy Bob Harold Jr., the humble Texas father we met, is a classic victim of this. After winning $31 million from Lotto, Texas, in Mastosian 997, he suffered from excessive generosity syndrome in a severe way. He bought a brand new Ford F-350 pickup truck for himself, a large house in suburban Houston with a tennis court and a pool, and organized the family's first trip to Las Vegas, where he spent $100,000 on a suite at the Bellagio in a Cirque du Soleil show. But at the same time, he also gave a lot of money to friends and family, paying off medical debts for his parents, buying cars for his cousins, and even sponsoring a neighbor's wedding with a total cost exceeding $10 million in the first year alone. This generosity not only quickly depleted his bank account, but also caused pressure and conflicts in his relationships. Friends began to expect more, leading to marital tension with Barbara, and finally, a divorce in 1998. Billy Bob once told a friend, "I thought I was helping people, but now I just feel like I'm buying silence." His story, analyzed in detail in the book The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley, illustrates how reckless spending, often increasing to 5x their old income, leads to lifestyle inflation, where monthly bills devour the profits. Other examples in the US and internationally repeat this pattern in a terrifying way. David Lee Edwards, the drug-addicted ex-convict from Kentucky, who won $27 million from Powerball in 2001, spent to a crazy extent. He bought a 7-bedroom mansion in Ashland with a garage for 20 cars, a private Cessna Citation jet to fly to Atlantic City casinos, and dozens of cars, from a Ferrari 360 Modena to a Hummer H2, with a total cost exceeding $15 million in just 2 years. But it was these very expenses without a budget or tracking app like Mint that pushed him down the path to bankruptcy, with credit card debt and car maintenance costs devouring the rest. Similarly, Laura and Roger Griffiths accurately reflect the American tragedy. They bought a Malibu-style coastal dream house, took luxurious trips to the Bahamas on a rented yacht, and spent uncontrollably on Tiffany jewelry and Gucci clothes. The result? A lack of control led to mounting debt. A house fire, without adequate insurance, that burned down their assets, meant a bitter divorce in 2013, leaving them living in a small rented apartment in Manchester. Reminder that the generosity syndrome doesn't distinguish borders, but in America, it's amplified by the live large consumer culture, from Black Friday to Super Bowl ads. Many lottery winners, often manual laborers who have never touched stocks or mutual funds, lack knowledge about investment and easily become victims of sophisticated scams. From Bernie Madoff-style Ponzi schemes to self-proclaimed consultants on Craigslist, Abraham Shakespeare, the Florida truck driver who won $30 million in 2006, is the most tragic example. He was scammed and had his assets stolen by Didi Mura predator, with a sweet smile and the promise of professional management. Moore convinced Shakespeare she would help him invest in real estate and a charity fund. But in reality, she gradually withdrew over $1 million for designer clothes, a Mercedes car, and personal trips, while he blindly signed contracts due to a lack of legal knowledge. This ultimately led to the murder in 2009. But before that, it illustrated how easily lottery winners can be scammed by trusting acquaintances instead of checking with FINRA. Additionally, many lottery winners invest in risky projects or have no clear plan. They believe in the promises of scammers about gold investment or vague tech startups. Or they pour money into real estate without checking the market, like buying a condo in Miami during the 2008 bubble. Money that comes easy also goes easy, without a well-structured investment plan. and advice from professionals like a CFP with a fixed fee instead of a commission, a gigantic sum of money can also disappear in the blink of an eye. According to a report from the SEC, people with sudden wealth in the US lose an average of 40% of their assets through scams in the first 5 years, alarming number, especially when the IRS still demands taxes on those losses. Another financial trap, less mentioned but equally deadly, is the vicious cycle of addiction where wealth doesn't heal but instead nourishes bad habits, turning money into fuel for hellfire. Some lottery winners, after receiving their money, return to the habit of buying lottery tickets and scratch-offs at gas stations as a way to satisfy the dopamine-seeking thrill of the prize. Spending thousands of dollars each month on the very game that made them rich, a paradox that psychologists call gambler's fallacy. Mickey Carroll perfectly reflects this. Just like young American lottery winners, he blew the money on wild parties at Miami-style clubs, cocaine and heroin bought on the dark web, and high-end prostitutes, with a total cost exceeding £7 million in just 5 years. For him, money was not a tool to escape a dark life in the slums, to buy a house for his mother, or go to college, but a catalyst, pushing him deeper into the vortex of corruption. Completely bankrupt in 2010, he had to work as a street cleaner and then a coal miner at age 40, an outcome that reminds us that addiction from gambling to stimulants has a 3x higher rate in lottery winners, according to SAMHSA. In the US, this cycle often leads to debt from high-interest payday loans or losing homes due to online gambling on BHMGM, turning a jackpot into a one-way ticket to rehab. These financial traps are not exclusive to jackpot winners. You can see similar mistakes in people with sudden high incomes, like tech employees in Silicon Valley receiving stock options, or those inheriting from grandparents in rural Iowa. Impulsive spending and a lack of planning lead to yacht poor, bankruptcy. The lesson to be learned is, money is not just a number on a banking app, but also a heavy responsibility, requiring you to have basic knowledge, preparation, and discipline. Hire a financial advisor, first an independent CFP with an hourly fee. Not a commission to set up a trust to protect assets. Diversify investments through Vanguard or Fidelity, and establish a 6-month emergency fund. Don't spend first. Take a 6-month break after winning the lottery to allow your brain to adapt, as recommended by the Behavioral Finance Institute. So the question for you, the American watching this video amid soaring housing prices and a fluctuating stock market ease. Will you hire a financial advisor first, or will you spend first on a trip to Hawaii? This decision will say a lot about your readiness. If you choose to spend first, you are falling into the same trap that Jack, Billy Bob, Abraham, and David fell into, where money turns into smoke. Conversely, if you seek help from professionals checking through the CFP board website, you have taken a step in the right direction, a step that will help you avoid deadly mistakes and turn a jackpot into a lasting legacy. Money didn't kill them, it just exposed the truth about our preparation. The final part will summarize everything from tragedy to hope, with a practical action plan for you, whether you win the lottery or not, to build true wealth in America today. Money magnifies human nature after wading through the turbulent waves of personal tragedy. Social pressure like demanding calls from family in the suburban Midwest, sharp financial traps like a 37% IRS tax bill, or a scam from a self-proclaimed consultant on Wall Street. We finally arrive at a deeper part of philosophical part, where we pause to breathe, to reflect, and to look into the mirror of our own souls. This is no longer about cold numbers on a bank statement or prolonged lawsuits in a local court. This is the core of every story we've told, the true nature of money. Money is not just a simple tool of exchange, buying a Starbucks coffee this morning or paying the utility bill at the end of the month. A symbol of American rags to riches wealth that Hollywood often celebrates through movies like The Pursuit of Happiness. It is also a powerful amplifier, like a high-powered speaker at a rock concert in Madison Square Garden, that doesn't create new sounds, but only magnifies the notes that already exist within. It doesn't change who you are. It doesn't turn a humble, Uber driver in Los Angeles into a ruthless billionaire like Gordon Gekabut only magnifies what was already inside them. A generous person will become so extravagant they harm themselves. A greedy person will become cruel and isolated, and a kind person can become vulnerable to a deadly degree. This is the most profound, most philosophical lesson that the stories of lottery winners provide, not from thick financial books on a Barnes and Noble shelf, but from real, shattered lives in West Virginia or Florida, where money whispers harsh truths about who we are. In America, where the dream of wealth is worshipped as a civil religion, from the Declaration of Independence to the speeches of Warren Buffett, this part reminds us that money is not the destination. It is a magnifying glass that illuminates our inner darkness. Imagine money as a chemical reagent in the laboratory of life. If you pour it into a neutral solution, it doesn't change color. But with a hidden drop of acid, it explodes into a chain reaction. Philosophers like Aristotle and Nicomachean Ethics once said that money is a tool for living well. But lottery winners show us that it is also a harsh test of character, magnifying virtues into weaknesses and flaws into disasters. A study from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, based on data from thousands of heirs and lottery winners, shows that sudden wealth doesn't create new greed. It only amplifies the seeds of greed already sown since childhood. From the days of scarcity in an Appalachian trailer park to the failed dreams in a Silicon Valley startup garage. And in today's American context, with inflation eating away at the middle-class dream and a wealth gap as wide as the Grand Canyon, this lesson is even more urgent. Money doesn't solve problems, it just makes them bigger, clearer, and more painful. Jack Whitaker is a classic textbook example of this philosophy of pure American story. From the dusty roads of West Virginia to the fleeting heights and then the depths of loss. Before winning the lottery in 2002, Jack was a successful but humble 55-year-old construction businessman. Known to his local community for his genuine generosity, he sponsored scholarships for poor children in Salt Rock, repaired churches after floods, and was always the first to pull out his wallet to help a struggling neighbor, a model of American goodness that small Hallmark movies often glorify. Those were the seeds of virtue sown during the Great Depression, when he watched his father labor hard in the coal mines to support the family. But when he had $315 million from Powerball in his hands, the largest jackpot in history at the time, which turned him from a middle-class man into a national icon through news broadcasts on NBC, that kindness was magnified to a deadly weakness, like a wildfire spreading rapidly in a dry wind. He became uncontrollably generous. He donated tens of millions to flood relief organizations in the Midwest, built a new church with a playground for children, and even carried $545,000 in cash in his SUV to give directly to the poor at community events. At first, it seemed like a dream. Cheers echoed. Articles in the Charleston Gazette-Mail hailed him as the Santa Claus of Appalachia. And Oprah invited him on her show to tell an inspiring story. But that amplification quickly attracted hundreds of scammers and demanding people who swarmed like bees. Old friends suddenly returned with business ideas, distant relatives demanded a family share, and strangers sued him for fabricated reasons, from a fake car accident to a promised donation. The result? Sued up to 400 times in just 3 years. A colossal number that kept his team of lawyers as busy as federal judges, devouring $20 million in legal fees and time. Ultimately, his generosity, once a source of light for the community, was fully exploited. Turning into an unbearable burden, he lost his daughter and granddaughter in tragedies related to addiction and stress. Divorced his longtime wife, and lived in seclusion in a large house now filled only with darkness. Jack once said in a rare interview with the Washington Post, his voice trembling, "The money made me a bigger version of myself, but that version was too big, too fragile." His story, retold in the HBO documentary, "The Lottery Changed My Life," illustrates how money magnifies a virtue into a weakness. Kindness without boundaries becomes social suicide. A philosophical lesson that in America, where giving back is an ideal, you need to learn how to give without destroying yourself. The spiritual void in addiction money doesn't just magnify virtues. It also exposes the deep voids in the soul. Emotional black holes that daily life from a 9 to 5 office job, 2 nights spent watching Netflix alone once temporarily covered. When a person suddenly becomes rich, they tend to see money as an unlimited resource, like water from a tap turned wide open in the Mojave Desert, stimulating the brain's reward center, releasing a flood of dopamine that leads to impulsive behavior, addiction, and a cycle of seeking short-term pleasure to fill a long-term void. Mickey Carroll, though from the UK, accurately reflects the tragedy of young American lottery winners, and he is a painful testament. Winning £9.7 million in 2002 at age 19, equivalent to over $15 million, he wasn't a bad kid from the start. He grew up in the slums of Swindon, with a dream of escaping poverty, just like millions of American teens dreaming of the NBA or a startup. But money amplified that void. The lonely nights from a fatherless childhood, the fear of failure from dropping out of school, and the desire for recognition. Instead of using the money to go to college or buy a house for his mother, he blew it all on wild parties at Miami Beach-style clubs. Cocaine and heroin bought from street dealers and high-end prostitutes, spending £2 million in the first year alone on week-long parties with champagne and a Lamborghini. Money wasn't the reason he became corrupt. It was just a means for him to satisfy deep-seated desires and fill the void inside him. This void that he later admitted in therapy was a huge hole from his years of scarcity. Just 8 years later, completely bankrupt, he returned to work as a street cleaner and then a coal miner at age 40, living in a social housing apartment with sleepless nights filled with regret. Mickey's story, told in the book Broke, The Man Who Won the Lottery and Lost Everything by Ben Quinn, is exactly like American cases such as David Lee Edwards. Money activates old addictions, turning them into a storm, because the brain doesn't distinguish between pleasure and destruction. Sudden wealth syndrome that we explored in the previous part also shows this scientifically. Symptoms like depression, social isolation, and addiction are not random. They are the mind's reaction to the amplification of the void. Lottery winners don't just lose money through spending or scams, but also lose themselves. They become strangers to the values that once shaped their lives. Like the resilience from manual labor in Detroit or the honesty from a rural Iowa family losing their identity and purpose amid empty mansions and swollen bank accounts. They can buy anything from a Super Bowl VIP ticket to a yacht off the coast of the Bahamas, but they cannot buy peace of mind. Because as the philosopher Epicurus once said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. In America, where a consumer culture promotes happiness through stuff via Black Friday ads, these voids are even deeper, leading to a suicide rate 3x higher in the sudden wealth group, according to data from the CDC. Not all lottery winners end in tragedy. And this is the philosophical ray of hope amid the darkness. Those who succeed are often the ones who had psychological preparation before they got the money. Like an athlete training for years before the Olympics, instead of hoping for a miracle. They know that money is not the answer to all problems. It doesn't heal childhood wounds or fill the void of loneliness, and they don't let it change who they truly are. Think of people like Mavis Vonchek, who won $758 million Powerball in 2017 in Massachusetts. She chose to quit her job immediately, but planned carefully with a consultant, kept her secret from most people, and used the money to support her family with boundaries. As a result, she still lives peacefully in her old house, with her own charity fund and no lawsuits. People like this understand that money is just a tool, like a hammer for driving nails or a saw for cutting wood, and they need the wisdom to use it correctly, diversifying investments, setting social boundaries, and pursuing a greater purpose, like volunteering at a local soup kitchen or writing a book about their journey. This philosophy goes even further, touching the core of the American identity. Money is not just a tool, but also a harsh test, testing patience against impulsive decisions, greed against get-rich-quick investment offers, and wisdom against balancing giving and keeping. If a person is not internally prepared through meditation, therapy, or simply daily self-reflection money will become a curse, magnifying darkness into a catastrophe. Conversely, if they are prepared building a solid identity from family values, community, and personal purpose, money will be a powerful tool for them to realize their true dreams. Starting a social enterprise in Detroit, volunteering in Appalachia, or simply raising their children with a lesson on saving. As the philosopher Seneca wrote in Letters from a Stoic, wealth is not in having much, but in having control over what you have. In America, where self-made is a national myth, this lesson reminds us that internal preparation, not lucky, is the real key. So, the biggest question is not, can money buy happiness? Because science from the Harvard Grant study, which tracked people for 80 years, has proven that happiness comes from relationships, not from the wallet. But rather, does money make you happier? Or, to put it another way, if you had money, what would it reveal about your nature aversion that is sustainably generous or self-destructively extravagant, kindly with boundaries or easily exploited? Money can expose the greed hidden beneath a humble exterior, the insecurity from past failures, but it can also help us become a better version of ourselves. If we have enough internal preparation, such as building a habit of self-reflection through journaling or joining a support group like Debtors Anonymous. In the darkness of lottery tragedies, money whispers the truth about you. It will tell you who you really are when there are no more financial limits, someone who controls their destiny, or a victim of their own desires. And now, let's turn that mirror toward us. Amid the fluctuating American economy with Fed interest rates and soaring housing prices, what would you do if the jackpot came? Would you amplify the light or the darkness within? The final part will close this journey with a practical action plan, turning philosophical lessons into concrete steps. Because whether you win the lottery or not, true wealth begins from within.
Turning the mirror on ourselves. After a long journey full of turbulent waves, from the heartbreaking personal tragedies like Jack Whitaker's sitting alone with his money now filled only with pain in West Virginia, to the social pressure tightening like demanding calls from cousins in suburban Ohio, or the subtle whispers of envy from old friends at a local Texas bar, the sharp financial traps like a 37% IRS tax bill that devours a jackpot, or scams from self-proclaimed consultants on LinkedIn. In Manhattan, we finally reach a stopping point, a part not to end but to begin, turning the mirror on ourselves. The stories of lottery winners are not just a thrilling Hollywood movie with dramatic climaxes and tragic endings like an episode of Dateline, NBC, or a documentary on Netflix, but also a sharp, unforgiving mirror that reflects the deepest desires, fears, and potential within each of us. After all the pain, deadly mistakes, and philosophical lessons about money as an internal amplifier, you must face a raw, most important, perhaps most frightening question. If you woke up tomorrow with $100 million in your Chase bank account, after a record Powerball drawing on CNN NewsHour, you truly ready? Not ready to buy a Ferrari or a trip to the Maldives, but ready to face yourself with the darkness and light that sudden wealth will magnify. In America, where the American dream is printed on every dollar bill, this question is not just a hypothetical. It is a call to action amid inflation eating away at the middle-class wallet and a wealth gap as wide as the Grand Canyon, reminding us that true wealth begins with the preparation of the soul and mind, not from a random ball number. This question is not just about money, the cold numbers on a banking app or a Form 1040 tax bill, but more deeply. It's about comprehensive preparation, internal to withstand sudden wealth syndrome, social to set boundaries with family and friends, financial knowledge to turn a lump sum into a sustainable legacy instead of smoke. The majority of lottery winners who met with tragedy lacked that preparation. They grew up in working-class families in the Rust Belt or Midwest, where saving meant a piggy bank instead of an ETF. And happiness was a family dinner around an IKEA table instead of a penthouse with the Central Park view. They believed that money would solve all their problems, paying off the average student debt of $37,000, buying a house amid an average price of $400,000 in the suburbs, or erasing childhood wounds from the Great Depression. But in the end, money itself created new, bigger problems. paranoia from strange calls at midnight, mounting lawsuits from old acquaintances, and an emotional void wider than ever. Jack Whittaker, Abraham Shakespeare, or Billy Bob Harold Jr. are all living. Painful testaments to this, not because they were bad people, but because they were ordinary. Humble Americans who were never equipped to steer a financial Ferrari into a storm. They lost not just money through impulsive spending or sophisticated scams, but also lost themselves. Whittaker lost his family and peace in Appalachia. Shakespeare lost his life to betrayal in sunny Florida, and Harold lost hope in a lonely gunshot in Houston. These tragedies, retold through thousands of articles in the New York Times or podcasts like Lottery Winners Gone Broke on Spotify, are not meant to scare, but to warn. Without preparation, $100 million is not a blessing. It's a time bomb, detonating the inner seeds you never knew you had. However, amid the darkness of those shattered stories, not all of them end in tragedy, and this is the real shining ray of hope for the Americans watching this video during a night shift at an Amazon warehouse in Seattle or a lunch break at a Wall Street office. There are people who have turned the jackpot dream into a sustainable reality, turning money into a sharp tool to build a better life, not through external luxury, but through internal purpose and a lasting legacy. They are the ones who are prepared, internally solid through daily self-reflection or therapy. With a tight financial plan, with a CFP advisor, and most importantly, the wisdom to realize that money is not the destination, but the means to live true to American values: freedom, community, and the pursuit of happiness. These success stories, so often less covered by the media than tragedies because they are not as clickbait, are living proof from data by NASPL. About 30% of lottery winners maintain their wealth long-term due to deliberate strategy. Let's explore some typical examples, the unsung heroes of the American dream, to see how they turned a curse into a blessing. Brad Duke, a 38-year-old retail store manager from Nampa, Idaho, a small town with potato fields and a simple middle-class dream: won a $220 million Powerball jackpot, a colossal sum enough to buy an entire agricultural county. Instead of rushing into a Vegas-style whirlwind of spending or impulsively shopping on Rodeo Drive, Brad, who grew up with lessons on saving from his factory worker parents, paused to breathe. He chose to take the lump sum of about $89 million after taxes, but the first thing he did was hire a team of independent financial advisors and lawyers to set up a revocable living trust to protect his assets from lawsuits. He invested wisely, 60% into an S&P 500 index fund through Vanguard for long-term growth, 30% into government bonds for stability, and 10% into local real estate like organic farms in the Boise Valley, creating jobs for the community. He established the Duke Foundation, a scholarship fund that sponsors the education of hundreds of poor children in Idaho, from tuition at Boise State University to STEM programs for public schools, and invested in small businesses like a local craft brewery, turning money into local economic drivers instead of personal luxuries. Nearly 20 years later, at age 58, Brad is still wealthy, with his assets having doubled thanks to compound interest. But he chooses to live a normal life, staying in his old family home with a vegetable garden in the backyard, driving his old Toyota Tacoma, and spending time volunteering at a local food bank. In a 2023 interview with the Idaho Statesman, he shared, "Money didn't change me, just helped me multiply what I already loved: family, community, and a meaningful job." Brad's story, told in the book Lucky You, The Real Stories of Lottery Winners by Mark Godot, is proof that with preparation, a 6-month break after winning to allow the brain to adapt can turn a jackpot into a legacy, not a burden. Tim Schulze, college student from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who worked overtime at a convenience store to pay off his tuition debt, won a $28 million hot lotto jackpot. A huge amount for a young man who once dreamed of graduating without debt, instead of rushing into Florida-style spring break parties or buying a sports car to show off on Instagram. Tim, raised with Catholic values from a Polish American working-class family, acted immediately with wisdom beyond his years. He chose the annuity to receive a stable income of about $1 million a year for 25 years, reducing the tax burden and forcing himself to budget. The first thing he did was hire a CFP financial advisor from the Wisconsin Association to create a diversified investment plan. 50% into blue-chip stocks like Apple and Coca-Cola for growth. 40% into real estate like rental apartments in Milwaukee's historic Third Ward, and 10% into an emergency fund. He avoided common mistakes by keeping his identity a secret, refusing all requests from old friends by setting up an anonymous charity fund, and even investing in his personal passion, producing independent documentaries about American labor history and the Lottery Lessons podcast on Spotify, where he shares his lessons with young people. Thanks to this, he still holds all his assets. Now at age 46, with a net worth of over $50 million, thanks to compound interest and smart investments, living in a modest house by Lake Michigan with his wife and 2 children, focusing on teaching his kids about finance through a real-life Monopoly game. He once said in one of his own podcast episodes in 2022, "I didn't want to become a bankruptcy statistic. 70% of lottery winners lose everything, so I found an advisor the very next day. Money is a tool, but wisdom is the key." Tim's story, praised in Forbes as a true winner, reminds us that youth is not a barrier if you have preparation, starting with a simple notebook to write down your goals. Sheila Ryan, a 45-year-old office secretary from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania's Steel City, with stories of manual labor and a simple retirement dream, won the Pennsylvania lottery for $52 million, a large sum at the time amid a recovering American economy after a recession. Instead of chasing a lavish, dynasty-style lifestyle, Sheila, a single woman who grew up in an Irish immigrant family with less is more, values, chose a humble and purposeful path. She took the lump sum of about $28 million after taxes, but immediately established the Ryan Foundation, a charity dedicated to poor women and children in Appalachia, funding everything from shelters for domestic violence victims to scholarships for teenage girls at Pittsburgh boarding schools. She invested safely, 70% in U.S. Treasury bonds for stable income, 20% in a Fidelity mutual fund, and 10% in small real estate like affordable rental apartments to create passive income. She lived frugally in her old house with a backyard garden, drove an old Chevy Suburban, and spent most of her time volunteering at a local soup kitchen, writing handwritten letters of encouragement to hundreds of women through her foundation. She passed away in 2015 at age 84, leaving a legacy of over $100 million to her charity without a single lawsuit or scandal. In a final letter published in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, she wrote, "The money helped me help people just like I used to be, not to change me, but to change their little world." Sheila's story, told in the book The Quiet Rich by Charles Hampton Turner, is a lesson in the power of humility. In America, where women often face an 82-centionth dollar wage gap, internal preparation can turn a jackpot into a tool for empowerment. Pearlie Smith, a 63-year-old retired mother from Detroit, Michigan, a city that was once the auto capital, but is now struggling with bankruptcy and rebirth. And her family won a $429 million Powerball jackpot, one of the largest in history, which they shared with her children and grandchildren. Instead of going public to be on shows like Good Morning America and inviting chaos, they kept their identities a secret according to Michigan law, and immediately hired a lawyer to set up a family trust to protect their assets from demands. After taxes, they received about $280 million lump sum, which they invested safely, 50% into an index fund through BlackRock for growth, 40% into real estate like rental houses in Detroit's revitalized Midtown, 10% into cash for an emergency fund. They made large donations to the local Henry Ford Health System hospital funding medical equipment for poor areas and established a scholarship fund for Detroit children, focusing on STEM to combat the high unemployment rate in the Motor City. Nearly 10 years later, the family is still wealthy and united, living in modest houses with backyards, and avoiding the media by refusing all interviews. Pearlie once shared anonymously with the Detroit Free Press in 2018, "We are not rich because of luck. We are rich because we know how to preserve and give in the right way." Their story, tracked through charity reports, illustrates the power of family unity in America. Where the divorce rate doubles after sudden wealth, Collective preparation can turn a jackpot into a generational bridge. These stories, from the humble Brad Duke in Idaho to the resilient Pearlie Smith in Detroit, show a profound, important truth. The real jackpot is not the glittering money on the TV screen, but the wisdom to know who you will become if you have it, a builder of legacy or a victim of your own desires. Money is just a tool, like a hammer in a carpenter's garage, and how you use it is what matters. With a plan, boundaries, and purpose, it can build a house. Otherwise, it will break your knees. According to research from the Behavioral Economics Lab at Duke University, successful people like them share one common trait. They started preparing before they went through books like Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, or apps like Acorns to learn small-scale investing. So, the story of lottery winners is not just about them, the unfamiliar faces on the news or in documentaries, but also about us. It's the Americans sitting in a suburban Atlanta living room, watching this video during rush hour traffic on I-75, or the office worker in San Francisco worried about a $3,000 month rent bill. Challenges us to look deep inside, to ask ourselves tough questions. Who will you become if there are no more financial limits? The sustainably generous version, like Brad Duke, or the self-destructively extravagant one, like Jack Whitaker? Are you wise enough to learn from those who have succeeded, starting today by creating a budget on Excel or reading The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel? Amid the fluctuating American economy, with a 5.25% Fed interest rate and a 5% annual increase in housing prices, this journey doesn't end here. It begins with you one small step, like saving 10% of your monthly salary or talking to a free financial advisor through Credit Karma. Because whether the jackpot comes or not, true wealth, peace, purpose, and freedom is always within reach. If you turn the mirror and take action, thank you for accompanying me. Now, pick up a pen and write your own next chapter. We have embarked on an emotional journey together, from the illusion of the jackpot to heartbreaking tragedies, and finally to inspiring success stories. Let's summarize it all and turn these lessons into a concrete action plan. If luck smiles on you, what will you do to avoid becoming a bankruptcy statistic and turn money into a tool to build a better life? The first and most important lesson is to protect yourself. If you win the lottery, keep it a secret. Don't rush to go public or tell anyone, including relatives, until you have a concrete plan. Pearlie Smith's family, after winning $429 million, kept it a secret and did not reveal their identity, which helped them avoid unnecessary trouble. One of the biggest mistakes lottery winners make is not seeking help from experts. Tim Schultz, who won $28 million at just 21 years old, immediately hired a financial advisor to plan his investments. A professional team, including a lawyer, an accountant, and a financial advisor, will help you. Choose between taking the lump sum and receiving annual payments to optimize taxes. Create a long-term investment plan, diversifying your portfolio to protect your assets. Establish a charity fund or a scholarship fund, as Brad Duke did, to help the community in a planned and effective way. When you have a gigantic amount of money in your hands, it's easy to fall into the trap of excessive generosity and reckless spending. Create a clear spending budget. Set aside a small portion of the money to satisfy your desires, but dedicate the majority to investing and saving. Brad Duke invested wisely and is still wealthy after 20 years. While Billy Bob Harold Jr. lost everything due to uncontrolled generosity, money is not the answer to all problems. It is just a tool. Use it to explore and find your life's purpose. Sheila Ryan, who won $52 million, established a charity fund to help women and children, and she found joy in helping others. Ultimately, the real jackpot is not the money, but the wisdom to know who you will become if you have it. The stories of lottery winners, both tragic and rare successes, are mirrors. They remind us that money is only a small chapter in life. What truly matters is preparation, wisdom, and the quiet truths of human nature. If you'd like to keep exploring life's mysteries with me, softly subscribe and turn on the little bell. Together, we'll wander through the questions you've always carried and maybe find the answers in the dark. Don't miss the next story.
You've crossed the story. You felt every pulse in the dark. and I was there with you, quietly, always. That's why I left behind one last thing. Not to explain, not to impress, just to stay with you a little longer. A song I chose with care, as if tucking you in from across time and space. So go on, lay back, the music knows where to take you. If you're still here, then you're something rare. Not many stay this long. So, thank you for choosing to stay. I'm here too, still awake, surrounded by the quiet glow of my editing screen, shaping the next stories just for you. If there's anything you want to leave behind, a whisper, a suggestion, even just a symbol, drop it in the comments. Because maybe, tomorrow night, you'll hear yourself echoed in a story that's never been told before.